Hey Pathfinders, Pastor Randy. Glad you're with us again this week. This is week number 8. And today I'm up at Big Lake. I had to spend some time up here showing some people around as we're getting ready to work on the lodge this summer. Maybe you've heard about that. And so there's lots of preparatory work that has to be done. And so I'm up here trying to help facilitate that. And Desiree asked me if I would do a little quick devotional for you, and maybe we could then do the introductions of everybody that's presenting today. I want to thank them. We've got the painting honor we're finishing up, and we'll be starting in on sewing, which is pretty neat. So I'm excited about that. So today, as I was walking around giving the tour, I don't know if you can tell, but it's snowing here, but the ground is pretty much melted off, all the snow that they got from the winter. There's still some piles, maybe 2-3 feet deep in different areas. But as I was walking around, I found next to the snow a Big Lake yo-yo. It glows in the dark. I'm kind of excited, finders keepers kind of a thing. So here's a glow in the dark yo-yo. I'm guessing you've all tried yo-yoing before. You know that if you whip it down, I don't know if you can see, but if you whip it down and pull it back up, it comes right back up to your hand. That's kind of fun. You do that. It works if you do it right. Have you ever done your yo-yo wrong? You go like this, and then it doesn't come back up, and then you've done it wrong, and it gets all twisty twirly, and you have to let it untangle, and then you got to do the whole wind it back up thing, right? And if it's not a very tight yo-yo, it takes a while to get it started. Then once it gets started, you got to really work at it to get it going. You got to do it right, or it doesn't work, right? There's a thought for you. I got another one. So part of the things I'm doing up here at Big Lake is working with locks and keys. I don't know, maybe you remember that I used to do that before I became a pastor, and they're needing some help with that up here at camp, so they asked me to. So this is a lock cylinder. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's the part of the lock that the key goes into. And if you do it right, the key goes in and you can turn it, right? You've all done that. Maybe you're at home, or in a car door or whatever. If you stick the key in and it's all keyed up right, it turns. But here's the thing. See, locks are made up of, inside that cylinder, lots of little itty bitty parts. I'm going to flip this around so you can see what it looks like if I can. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't let me, so I'm just going to turn it around. Yeah, that's a pinning kit. Lots of little pieces of metal. And those pieces of metal match the bumps on the key, right? So they're a little piece of metal that's about that deep. And I know we're really washed out because of the snow. I'm getting worse and worse. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, not much better. Anyway, lots of little bumps, right? If you put the right size pins in there and you put the right key in, you can turn it. Guess what happens if you stick the wrong key in? You stick it in there, you can try all day long, it's not turning. Cause what? You didn't do it right. You did it wrong. You got the wrong size pins for that key. The bumps on this key are not the same as the bumps on this key. When I think of doing things right and doing things wrong, I think of that verse that we are all learning this year in Ezra. The verse says that Ezra purposed in his heart to learn the law of God. In other words, he purposed in his heart to learn how to do things the right way. And then it says he decided he was going to do it. He was going to do the things that God said this is the right way to do it. And he's going to do them. I thought that was pretty cool. And then he decides to teach it. Teach the statutes and ordinances, the laws of God, to the children of Israel. So not only did he want to learn how to do things right in God's eyes, he determined not only how, but to do it, to actually do it, and then to teach what he had learned. I hope you choose to do those things as well. Take the words of God into your heart and decide that that's the kind of person you want to be, the kind of person God would choose for you. And then go do it. And then when you encounter people with tons of grace, urge them forward to being the best person they can be for God. So that's my prayer for you today. And I pray that as you go through this week and in the weeks to come, you continually learn to be more and more the type of person God would have you be. Let's bow our heads together. Father in heaven, I thank you for this day and the opportunity to be together. I thank you for those who are willing to teach and the time that is spent by the kids learning. Lord, I pray that these things would be anchored in our hearts in such a way that we would never forget them. Thank you for looking out for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Blessings on you. Sorry I'm all washed out, but that's what happens when it's snowing. Talk to you later. Bye.
Oh, hey, Pathfinders. Adael here. Don't worry, I'm just emotionally eating because I miss you guys. Let me just get changed really quickly, and I'll get back right to you. Whew. Thank you for waiting. Last time we talked about color and how they interact with one another. Today, we are going to talk about color media and the different materials that are used in art. Now, don't confuse color media with the news. If anything, it's not that at all. In fact, color media is the materials that are used to make art. Some of these medias consist of crayons, acrylic paint, color pencils, pastels, inks, charcoal, and markers. Lots and lots of markers here. There are so many different types of color medias, it's insane! But today I want to focus on just a few and how they are used. Take, for example, paint made with egg yolk. Tempera. Tempera is a water-based paint. It's when the paint is able to be washed up with soap and water. Some other mediums that are also part of this group is acrylic and watercolor. Water-based paints differ from their similar yet different counterparts. Oil paints. Oil-based paints are paints that consist of an oil base. Therefore, they would need to use turpentine to wash up the brushes and other materials. Some of the mediums that are part of this is oil pastels and oil paints. And what about the other materials, like gesso, masking fluid, or turpentine? Well, gesso is a medium that is applied onto a canvas before painting, so it makes it easier to paint on and blend colors together. Masking fluid is a fluid that is placed onto a piece of paper when you want a certain part to remain white, so that you can maybe color it later so it doesn't mix with the other colors. Turpentine is used for cleaning brushes that have oil on them, but mediums aren't the only thing that are important when it comes to painting. Take, for example, a easel. A easel is used to place a canvas onto this board. That way, it holds the canvas firm, and you can just draw on it without having to fear of it moving away. Sometimes canvases will grow legs and walk away. I've seen it happen. Another thing that is also useful is a paint palette. A paint palette is a flat surface board that is used to put paints on top of. Unfortunately, I do not have any because mine broke, but I do use a paper plate if I want to, just put paints on top of it. That way I can just throw this away and I don't have to wash it. Personally, for me, if you want to start off painting, I recommend getting one of these things because paint palettes can be expensive and maybe you don't have the time to buy it. So just keep that in mind. This is where I keep all of my supplies. One of the most important things that you're going to need to learn today is about brushes. You see this right here? Notice how it's roundish at the top? This is a round brush. This is a brush that's used to create broad strokes with a good amount of quality fluid paint. This is a flat brush. See how it's flat at the top here? This is used when you put paint on it and it's applied into just broad, flat areas of the canvas. It's not really meant for detailed work, but it can be if you want to. This right here, see how it's very thin, the brush? This is a linear brush. This is used when you want to put like small little details in areas of the canvas. This is a fan brush. No, this does not help over the summer to keep you cool, but this right here is able to use on canvases when you want to put little details like leaves or tree branches. This can also be applied when you want to make grass. Each thread is spread out so uniquely so that when you apply paint to it, it's able to spread many different types of linear paints across the canvas. And lastly, this is a mop brush. It's probably the biggest one out of all of them. It's long, but it has a rounded end also, just like our round brush. But this one is when you want to put just huge amounts of paints all over the canvas. This is really just the base body works of any canvas that you use. Now, me as a painter, I use these brushes in many different types of ways, not just in the ways that we know them in. But no matter how you use your brushes, it is always important to take care of them. To clean your brushes, you must first wash out under cool water until the water runs clear. Shake out the excess water and reshape the bristles, then you must allow the brush to dry up. For oil-based paints, do the same thing using mineral spirits or turpentine product instead of water. And that is all I have for you today. Join me next time when I will discuss the final requirements for the painting honor.
Thomas. I am a receptionist at the Oregon Conference. But before that, I was owner, manager of several quilt sewing stores. So I have been asked to help you guys with your sewing honor. So today we're going to cover sewing on buttons and snaps. And then we're also going to make a pin cushion, or you could actually use it for a beanbag. We're going to do this project, the sewing honor, in 3 segments. So that was 1. Our second segment is learning how to operate a sewing machine. And then our third segment is your actual sewing, and we're gonna have you guys make a face mask. So I have downloaded the list of requirements for your sewing honor, and you're gonna want to do the same thing. The first thing that it says is that you are going to need to learn about a thimble. So a thimble is something that is going to protect your finger, and it also is going to help you to push the needle through the fabric. Many different kinds. I've got here a metal thimble, and you notice I'm putting that on my middle finger. You for yourself will have to decide which finger you use. I personally like to push with my middle one. The metal thimble for me is not comfortable. I much prefer a rubber thimble, or they do make these in leather as well, which I really like. My all-time favorite is this little dot. It's a leather pad that has sticky on the back, and you can see I've used this a lot. I just place that on my finger where the needle is going to hit, and I use that to be able to push. It's the most comfortable one there is. If you're at home and you don't happen to have any of those things, you can also use a Band-Aid for your thimble. So you put the pad on your finger, and that is going to work well for you as well. You also are going to need a tape measure. However, not this kind. The tape measure has to be able to bend. This kind is not bendable. This is for construction, not sewing. So we're going to do away with that. Tape measure needs to be cloth or vinyl so that it bends. This is a straight one, and my favorite would be a retractable tape measure, because then when you're done, you can just push the button and you don't have to deal with this mess. Your next is scissors and shears. So there are many different sizes, brands, kinds. A shear is something that you're actually going to use to be able to cut out the fabric, and usually it has a much longer blade. And then it is also flat on the bottom, so that when you're cutting, you can cut right along the edge of the table, and that is a shear. A scissor, or what I like to call like a thread clip, this is never going to go through bulk fabric, but it works really well just to be able to clip a thread. So if I am cutting a piece of thread, that's what these are for. And then this guy is also a scissor rather than a shear, and it works very well for just cutting into little pieces of fabric. It is not going to do well with bulk. So the little guys, you're not going to be able to cut out whole patterns with, they're too small. The big guy, that's what it's for. It's actually a shear. And then we have a pinking shear. So the pinking shear does not do a straight cut. It does, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, it does a V cut, and the purpose for that is so that your fabric will not come unraveled. So you can see here, this piece of fabric is all ravelly. It's because it was cut there and then laundered, and in the washing machine, the threads came out and it all came undone. If I would have used my pinking shears and cut along that cut edge before I washed it, then this would have never come unraveled, and I wouldn't have wasted this much fabric. So that's a purpose of the pinking shear. There is also needles. For this hand sewing project, you're going to need a hand sewing needle. And if you basically go by what the label is on the package, you'll be okay. This one is called a hand applique needle. We're not going to do hand applique, so I'm not going to use it. This is a beading needle. We're not going to be doing beading, so I wouldn't use this needle either. Again, there's embroidery needle. For every kind of hand sewing, they make a needle. So we're going to go to the package that just says, on the actual package, it said hand sewing needles. And there still are a variety of sizes and kinds. So you want to take into account, if we're sewing on buttons, how big of the hole of the button. If we're sewing on little snaps, these snaps, again, I don't know if you can see, have little teeny tiny holes. And if I used a great big needle with a big eye, I'm never going to be able to go through the hole of the snap. So you have to take into account of what it is that you're doing and pick the right needle for the job. We are going to be doing a running stitch, and in order to be able to kind of rock the needle back and forth, I much prefer having a smaller needle that's shorter and one with a smaller eyeball. So it looks like those are all the things that you're going to need for our hand sewing, and we're going to start with doing sewing on buttons. We're going to go ahead and get started sewing on the buttons. So you're going to need a button that has 2 holes, one that has 4 holes. This is called a shank button that doesn't have any holes at the top. And then you're also going to need a sew on snap, and make sure that your snap has 2 sides to it. You're going to need to pick out a sewing machine needle. And again, I like the needle that is shorter and has a small eye. And then we have to get some thread. So that I'm using a bright colored thread just so hopefully on film you can see a little bit better. Before we go to stick this through the eye, you're going to want to cut your thread at a diagonal. That will help get the thread through. And then go ahead and just stick that right through. You notice that I have a white piece of paper here. That really helps if I'm looking onto the white background to see that through. And then go ahead and get just about an arm's length of thread. And we're sewing on buttons, so we need strength. So I'm going to use double thread this time. And go ahead and cut. And then we have to tie a knot. So if you will hold the eye of the needle where the thread is in your left hand, and the tail, I'm going to clip this again so that they're both the same length. The tail in your right hand, allow the left hand to pinch onto that tail, and I'm going to wrap the end of the thread around the needle 5 times. And then my right hand is going to go over top of that wrap, and I'm just simply going to slide down the needle. This is called a quilter's knot, and I love it. Easiest way there is to be able to tie a knot. So now I can go ahead and get started sewing my button because I've got my knot tied. What we're going to do first off is make an X. So decide where you want your button to be, and you're just simply going to put your needle up through. It's going to stop because we've got the knot on there, and you're going to then make an X. So I'm going to make my X about 1/4 of an inch because that's about the size of button I have. Poke that through there. So X is going to mark the spot, and it looks like maybe I've got this one a little bigger. That's all right. The button's going to hide it. Marking the X gives that some stability, and that also then is where the button is going to go. So once the X is marked, then you're simply going to come back through the fabric. Let's see if I can be all fingers. At one of the sections, go ahead and pick up your button. And then it's simply a matter right over top of the X, that place is marked, and you're going to go down through, up, and down 3 to 4 times. For this last time, instead of poking the needle all the way through, you're just simply going to put it through the hole on top of the fabric, bring it all the way through, and actually take that tail and wrap it around the bottom of the button 3 to 4 times, and then put the needle through. That gives the button a little bit of shank underneath. I'm going to try and get it through in the right spot here so that it makes the button easier to button on your garment. So that's what your top looks like. On the back side, we're going to have to tie that off. So what you're going to do is just simply grab a little bit of fabric with your needle, pull the thread through until the loop gets there. Once the loop is there, go ahead and put the needle through the loop and pull it taut, and there's your knot. And then we can clip that off. Okay, for sewing on the 4-hole button, I've already made my X. It is actually done exactly the same way. I'm going to go ahead and come up and put my button on. Remember, X marks the spot, so I know that that is where the button needs to go. And now instead of going back and forth this way, we're actually going to make an X in the button. So it's going to look like this when we're finished. So you're going to go back and forth. Really having a hard time today hitting the hole. There, we got it. So once you've gone left to right or right to left several times, then you're going to go the other direction, and then you're going to tie it off the back side just how we did the other one. Okay, now we're ready to sew our shank button. I've already tied the knot in the bottom of my thread, and shank button does not require the X. We're just going to find the spot on our fabric where we want our button to be. Go ahead and pull the needle through, pick up the button on our way through, and then the button is attached to your thread, and go ahead and just come in and out of the fabric, and then that is pulling your button taut to that. You can do that one more time if you feel a need, and then in and out of that shank. pulls it taut down to the fabric, and then I'm gonna go to the back side. And then to tie it off, I'm going to go in and out of the fabric again, pull the needle through until the loop comes. When the loop is right there, I'm going to stick my needle through the loop and then pull taut. That has tied the knot. And then I'm going to go ahead and clip that off. And then we have our shank button sewed on. Okay, it is time that we now are going to do our sew on snap. You're going to want to take the snap apart, figure out where you're going to want it on your fabric. The trick is to get some invisible tape, Scotch tape, and actually tape that snap into place exactly where you want it. Because you see what's happening? As soon as you move the piece of fabric, it is going to fly and you're going to have lost your snap. So you simply tape the snap into place. I have already sewn on one, and then I've got the other one taped so that I can show you. My needle and thread, I've already tied the knot in the end of my thread. So with that taped on, your snaps have 4 holes. So we're just going to go from the back of the fabric to the front inside of one of those holes. Basically like sewing on a button, except that you're doing it 4 times. And then, so it's in the hole, outside the hole. And we're going to do this 3 times. In the hole, outside the hole. And we are going to go on the outside of the hole, but instead of going to the back side, what we're going to do is run the needle around to the next hole and bring it up through the hole. Maybe we are. There it is. Ta-da! And we're going to do exactly the same thing. So now this time, instead of going down, you're going to just go under the snap and scoot over till you've hit the next hole in the hole outside of the hole. Make sure we pull those threads tight so you don't have a loop here. So once you've made it all the way around all 4 holes, and take your thread down to the back and tie your knot off, then this tape will just peel right off. And it looks like it's going to be stubborn and come off in piece by piece. Once the tape is off, your button is sewn on and your snap is sewn on, and then you can just simply snap your 2 together. Pretty cool, huh? Next, we're going to work on the bean bag. There are some supplies you're going to need. 2 pieces of fabric that are 5 by 5, a thimble, hand sewing needles, pins, matching thread, scissors, chopstick, beans, rice, something flaxseed, something to stuff your pincushion with. I use ground shells, and some polyfill. We're now ready to go ahead and start our pincushion, our beanbag, whatever you're going to use it for. We first need a pattern. So go ahead and just get a plain piece of paper and cut out a 5-inch square off the paper, and then this is going to be our pattern. We're going to need at least a 5 by 5 square of fabric, so this is just a scrap. We're going to put the ugly sides together, which we consider wrong sides, and so we're going to have both sides of the pretty side up, and go ahead and put your pattern on there, which is a 5 by 5 square, and we're just going to take a few of those pins and pin the pattern in place. You can do 4 if you want, whatever is comfortable for you. And then go ahead and take your shears, leave the fabric sitting on the table, and the scissors are actually on the table as well. And then we're just simply cutting around that 5-inch square, which is our pattern piece. Okay, there is our pincushion pattern, and all cut out. And go ahead and take the pins out, remove our pattern piece, and now we need to have the pretty sides together. We would call that right sides together. And we need to decide which side we're going to not stitch. We have to leave a hole for turning it inside out. So this is the side we're gonna mark, and I need about a 2-inch opening to be able to stick my hand in there and turn it. So I'm going to mark about 2 inches. Okay, that's 2.5. Good enough. That is where I'm going to leave open. I'm not going to sew that. And then we need to mark ourselves a stitching line so that we can sew straight. I'm going to switch colors here so that I think you can see better. So again, I'm going to mark this. I'm not going to sew here and here. And with a seam guide or anything that you have that can mark a 1/4 inch, a fabric marker or a pencil works just as well. So from the edge, we're going to make some marks that are a 1/4 inch. And this is going to be where I'm going to stitch. So you can go ahead and keep marking. And what you're going to want to do then is join those lines together. I'm going to switch again. So when you're done, this is what it's going to look like. So you've got your stitching line marked all the way around. And I did darken this to make it better on film for you. This time I would use matching thread. I have not for film purposes. Go ahead and thread the eye of your needle and tie the knot. And we're just simply going to start at where your line starts. There's a couple different ways we can do this. We're gonna do a running stitch on here. So I can actually pull it up and back down. And just keep doing that, keeping the stitch on your line and right next door to each other. Back and forth, back and forth. The other thing that you can do once you get good or you're tired of doing it this way, I'm going to remove this pin because I don't need it marked anymore. You can actually come up and swivel your needle in and out. And your goal is that your needle picks up only about a 1/16 of an inch of fabric. And what that did is saved me from having to go in and out so many times. When we're quilting, this is how we do it so that we can quilt a little bit faster. You're just taking the needle in and out, instead of having to go up and down. And on the back side, your stitching is right next door to each other. You're going to keep that up until you have gone all the way around. When you get to the corner, it's no different. You're going to come up and then continue stitching going the other direction. When you've gone all the way around, if your fabric was slipping, you could pin the fabric in place. I can now take those pins out. We're going to need to turn this inside out, right side out. We want the pretty side out, but before we do that, we need some trimming. We don't want to have this much fabric in the inside. If you have your pinking shears, then you could go ahead and trim the edges so that they're not going to come undone. If you don't have any pinking shears, just go ahead and leave the edges, but we're going to need to clip the corners. So with your scissors, All four corners need to be clipped at an angle. However, make sure you do not clip that stitching. Once your corners are clipped, then we can find where the hole is and go ahead and turn that so that the pretty side is out. So as you start turning, you're going to need a chopstick or something with a fairly pointed end to go ahead and poke out your four corners. And then we're going to have to fill the bag. You can use beans, and then it would truly be a bean bag. You could use flaxseed, you can use rice, anything that is going to make it weighted down works really well. So I've got a funnel here that works the best to be able to fill. And actually what I brought to fill with is hazelnut shells. And let's see if I can do this with one hand. So with the funnel, I can pour the hazelnut shells into my bag. And I need about 2/3 of a cup. So keep on shaking that till whatever you've got. Now, if this were beans, you can just put the beans in. You don't have to use a funnel because they're too big. Depending on how full you want your bean bag or pin cushion to be. And then you'll need a little bit of polyfill. So the polyfill can go in, just a little bit of chunk. What's that is for is because now we're going to hand sew this edge, and you don't want your flaxseed or your hazelnut shells to come out. And go ahead and get a pin or two and kind of run that in and out so that is going to stay in place while you sew it. Now to sew the hole, I've got my needle threaded with the knot in the end. We're going to start in the inside and come out so that the knot is hidden in the inside of your project. And you may have to move the pin a little bit. We're going to do exactly the same stitch as what we were doing before, in and out. Because this is thicker, it might be easier for you to go through the whole thing and back again. This is what I'm calling in and out. But it certainly is way faster if you can learn to rock your needle back and forth. Oops, and that does happen. The rock comes out. Same stitch, two different ways to do it. So continue stitching across till the hole is sealed, and then you're just going to want to tie it off. So go ahead and stick the thread to the inside. You're going to make a pass through until there's a loop. Go into the loop, tie it, pull it taut, and then close, clip it off. And there is your bean bag or your pin cushion.